In a small gym in Wilmington, North Carolina, a gesture made in the quiet of an after-mouse practice would set the course for history. A young, ambitious boy with big dreams and even bigger challenges would never forget the man who believed in him before anyone else did. But 4 decades later, the tables would turn, and the kindness of a coach would be repaid in ways none of them could have ever expected. The gym was a hollowed-out husk that night, its silence a canvas stretched taut until a single sound tore through it, the stubborn thud of a basketball against weathered hardwood. It was late, past 7:50 p.m. on an autumn evening in 1979, and Wilmington, North Carolina had folded into itself, a town where dreams simmered beneath the hum of porch lights and the clatter of supper dishes. Coach Daniel Harris lingered in the stillness of Laney High School's gymnasium, a 28-year-old assistant coach with a clipboard clutched like a lifeline, its edges worn smooth by restless fingers. Practice had ended hours ago, the varsity squad's chatter long faded down the locker-lined halls. He'd stayed behind, sketching drills under the flicker of a lone bulb, proving to himself he belonged in a place where basketball wasn't just sport, it was salvation, a ladder out of the ordinary. Then he heard it, a rhythm too raw to ignore, too desperate to be rehearsed. Thud, squeak. Thud, squeak. It tugged at him, a thread pulling loose from a memory he couldn't name. He set the clipboard down, its clatter swallowed by the vastness, and followed the call into the shadows. There, beneath a stuttering light, stood a boy, skinny as a sapling, his silhouette sharp against the court's expanse. He leaped, higher than Daniel thought possible for someone so slight, his body a bow drawn tight with yearning. The ball arced, kissed the rim, then fell away with a clang that echoed like a plea. Daniel squinted, recognition settling in. Michael Jordan, sophomore, cut from varsity 4 days prior. Coach Peterson had dismissed him with a flick of his pen, too small, too unripe, and relegated him to JV. Yet here he was, alone in the dark, chasing something no roster could measure. Daniel stepped closer, his own sneakers whispering against the floor, and then he saw them. Michael's shoes. Not shoes. Rex. Canvas shredded from rubber, soles so thin they flapped like a flag in defeat. Each jump was a miracle, each pivot a rebellion against the junk on his feet, and still the kid moved like he could rewrite gravity. "Hey!" Daniel called, his voice a lifeline slicing the quiet. "You're bending your wrist too much, that's why it's off." Michael spun, ball clutched to his chest, eyes wide with a startle that softened when he saw the assistant coach. "Sorry, Coach Harris," he said, voice low, winded. "I know I'm not supposed to be here this late." Sweat beaded on his forehead, glistening in the dim glow, and his breath came quick, a testament to hours spent alone. Daniel waved it off, stepping into the circle of light. "You're working your game, nothing wrong with that." He nodded at the hoop. "Show me again." Michael hesitated, then wiped his face with a sleeve, the fabric threadbare and damp. He shot the ball, spun, teetered, dropped short. Daniel crossed his arms, studying not just the form but the boy himself. Red-rimmed eyes, glassy with unshed tears, a jaw clenched against despair. For an hour they stayed, Daniel calling wrist straight, elbow in, Michael nodding, adjusting, shooting. Swish, swish. The kid drank in every syllable, turning pointers into motion with a hunger that gripped Daniel's chest. He'd coached dozens loudmouths, loafers, showboats, but none like this. Michael was a sponge, soaking up guidance, his will a quiet thunder rolling beneath the surface. "Those shoes," Daniel said, nodding at the wreckage on Michael's feet. "They're killing you." Michael bounced the ball once, twice, his gaze dropping. "Dad's truck broke down. Mom says maybe next month." Daniel's gut twisted. He knew the Jordans. James with grease-stained hands, Dolores stretching dollars for 5 kids. At Johnston's Sporting Goods, the Pro Stars, white with red stripes, cushioned soles, sat at $49.95. A dream for them, a dent for him. He reached for his wallet, leather creased from years, and pulled a $50 bill from $62 left that week. "Take this," he said, holding it out. Michael's eyes widened, big as moons. "I can't, Coach." "It's a loan," Daniel said, firm but warm. "For the Pro Stars. Pay me back when you make it big." He grinned, half joking, half believing. Michael stared, torn, then took it, folding it small. "I will, promise." Daniel nodded, throat tight. 6 a.m. tomorrow. Be here. Michael left and Daniel stood alone, $50 lighter, a spark heavier. The dawn crept over Wilmington's pines the next morning, a pale November light spilling through the mist as Coach Daniel Harris fumbled with the gym key at 5:55 a.m. The air bit cold, his breath fogging in the pre-dawn chill, and he half expected the court to greet him with its usual silence. The hollow echo of his own footsteps on hardwood, worn smooth by decades of dreamers. But as the lock clicked and the door swung open, there stood Michael Jordan, a silhouette against the gray, basketball tucked under his arm like a talisman. On his feet gleamed the Pro Stars, white with red stripes, laces knotted with a care that spoke louder than words. "Mom took me to Johnston's last night," he said, his grin slicing through the gloom, bright as the sun still hiding below the horizon. "These feel like I could fly." Daniel paused, the $50 bill a ghost in his emptied wallet, and felt a warmth bloom in his chest, sharp and unnameable. He nodded, stepping aside. "Show me," he said, and Michael bounded in, the squeak of new soles a hymn to beginnings. They didn't waste time on chatter, there was no need. Daniel tossed the ball, its leather cool against his palms, and called out, "Wrist straight, follow through." Michael caught it, eyes narrowing with a focus that belied his 15 years, and shot. The ball swished clean, the net snapping like a whip cracked in the stillness. Another followed, then another, each one a testament to a boy who'd turned a coach's words into muscle memory overnight. For an hour the gym rang with their rhythm. Thud, squeak, swish. A duet of grit and guidance played out in the half-light. Michael didn't flinch at correction, didn't pause to catch his breath. He was skinny still, his frame all angles and potential, but his hunger dwarfed his size, a force that seemed to bend the air around him. Daniel watched, arms crossed, and saw it. A will that could shatter stone, a heart that refused to kneel. "You're made for this, Michael," he said as the first rays pierced the windows. "Don't ever doubt it." Michael wiped his brow with a sleeve and kept going, the Pro Stars flashing like beacons with every leap. Those mornings wove themselves into a pact, a secret stitched into Wilmington's sleepy streets. Every day, before the town stirred or the janitors rattled their keys, Daniel and Michael met in that gym. Winter sank its teeth in, frost glazing the panes, but Michael pedaled through it, cheeks flushed red, eyes alight with a fire no cold could snuff. Spring softened the edges, then summer roared in, thick with heat and cicadas, and still he came. Bike propped against the wall, promising Dolores he'd be home by noon to haul wood or sweep the porch. Daniel bent his life around it, rising at 5 a.m., leaving Laura asleep with a scribbled note, "Jim. Back soon." Coach Peterson had handed him a key, trusting him to lock up after late practices, but he never asked about the dawn hours and Daniel never told. It was theirs alone, those moments when the world shrank to a ball, a hoop, and a bond forged in sweat. The Pro Stars took a beating, scuffed by June, their shine dulled by dust, but Michael polished them nightly, treating them like heirlooms. "They'll last," he told Daniel one muggy morning, sinking a free throw with a flick of his wrist. "Till I make varsity." Daniel grinned, but he saw more than shoes wearing thin. Michael grew 4 inches by junior year, his shoulders broadening, muscles carving definition into once lanky arms. At tryouts, Peterson posted the roster and there it was, Michael Jordan, top of the list. The kid raced to Daniel, pointing at the paper like it might dissolve. "Coach, look!" His voice cracked with disbelief, joy spilling over. Daniel clapped his shoulder, steady as ever. "Told you he'd see it." That season, Michael blazed, scouts scribbling notes, crowds buzzing. By senior year, they packed the bleachers, suits and clipboards a testament to a star rising. Daniel watched from the sidelines, pride a quiet tide in his chest, never boasting of the $50 or those mornings when the gym was their cathedral. One night, after a 42-point rout of a rival, a UNC scout cornered Michael. Daniel lingered nearby, shuffling papers to eavesdrop. "Coach Smith wants you at Chapel Hill," the man said, voice smooth as sails. Michael's jaw dropped. UNC? The Holy Grail? Later, in the empty locker room, he found Daniel, eyes wide. "They want me, Coach Harris. UNC!" His words trembled, half dream, half truth. You earned it, Daniel said, gripping his shoulder tight. Every swish. Michael shuffled his feet, the pro stars long traded for fancier gear, but his gaze burned with the same hunger. Those mornings, he said, soft as a confession. That $50, I wouldn't be here without you. Daniel shook his head, voice rough. You did the work, Michael. I just opened the door. Graduation came, and Michael crossed the stage, UNC bound, pressing a silver keychain into Daniel's hand. Thanks, Coach H. MJ. Just be great, Daniel told him, and Michael nodded, the fire now ablaze. Time turned soft and slow in Wilmington after Michael Jordan left, the summer of 1981 fading into a memory. Coach Daniel Harris carried like a stone smoothed by a river's patient hand. He stayed behind as Michael's star climbed, rooting himself in the sandy soil of North Carolina, building a life that bloomed quietly amid the pines. That fall, he married Laura on a windswept beach, the Atlantic crashing louder than their vows, her laughter a tether he'd cling to for decades. Hannah arrived in '83, a squalling spark of joy, followed by Caleb in '86, a boy with his father's steady gaze and a grin that lit the dark. Laney High became his cornerstone, the gym his altar, and coaching his creed. But as Michael's name grew, first a murmur at UNC, then a roar in the NBA, Daniel kept their story locked tight, a secret he wouldn't trade for glory, a gift he'd given with no ledger attached. He followed Michael's rise from the edges, a shadow tracing a comet's arc, newspapers stacked on his porch, ink smudging his fingers. Jordan sinks Georgetown, '82. Daniel sat in his sagging recliner, Hannah asleep against his chest, and cheered so loud Laura hissed from the kitchen, "You'll wake her!" The 1984 draft glowed on their tiny TV. Chicago Bulls select Michael Jordan, and Daniel hoisted Caleb onto his lap, whispering, "That's him, son. That's my player." Pride swelled, a tide he couldn't stem, but he never spoke of the $50, the pro stars, or those dawn hours when the gym was their sanctuary. To Wilmington, he was Coach Harris, head coach by '84 after Peterson stepped down, not the man who'd handed a skinny kid the tools to fly. He wore that silence like a badge, invisible but heavy, a choice carved from something deeper than modesty. Laney High flourished under his steady hand. His teams were tough, disciplined, fueled by heart. 4 state titles in 10 years, a legacy that drew scouts like bees to honey. Parents shook his hand after games, voices thick with thanks. Kids looked up to him, wide-eyed, dreaming of their own shots. Daniel brushed it off with a shrug, a half smile. "Just doing what I do," he'd say, and mean every word. In '89, a reporter from Raleigh nosed around, pen poised for Michael's origin tale. Daniel leaned against the gym door, arms crossed, the scent of polished wood sharp in his nose. "Hardest worker I ever coached," he offered, voice level as the horizon. "Knew he'd be something." The man pushed. "Any stories? Early days?" And Daniel's eyes crinkled, a wall rising. "That's plenty." He turned back to his clipboard, leaving the past where it lay, a quiet pact between him and a boy long gone. At home, he guarded it just as fierce. Caleb plastered his walls with Jordan posters, begging for Air Jordans, $110, a chunk of Daniel's pay. Laura arched a brow, but Daniel nodded. He's getting them. Caleb's grin, unwrapping the box, mirrored Michael's from '79, and Daniel's heart tugged. One night, tucking him in under that soaring MJ poster, Caleb asked, "Dad, did you really know Michael Jordan?" Daniel paused, the silver keychain. "Thanks, Coach." A weight in his pocket. "Coached him a little," he said, soft as dusk. "Way back." Caleb's eyes widened. "Did you teach him that dunk?" Daniel chuckled, low and warm. "No, son, that was all his." He never told more, never spoke of the $50, the mornings, the letter he wrote in '84 but never sent. That letter rested in his desk, scrawled under a flickering bulb after the draft. "Michael," it began, "knew you'd get here. Those swishes, that $50. Watching you now, it's enough." He'd poured out pride, memories of a boy's promise, but come morning he folded it shut. Laura found it days later, her voice gentle. "Why not send it?" Daniel shook his head, staring at the drawer. "He's a star. Doesn't need me dragging him back." She sighed, but let it be. To Daniel, seeking a spotlight felt like stealing. Michael had scaled that peak, every step his own. Daniel had just lit the match. The 90s unfurled Michael's reign. 6 titles, the Dream Team, a name that shook the earth. Daniel watched from his living room, scrapbook open when the house slept. Flu Game, 97. He stayed up, rewinding the tape, tears pricking at a man too proud to cry. Once a local station called, fishing for nostalgia. He worked for it, Daniel said, then hung up. In Wilmington, his own light glowed. Laney a powerhouse, his players known for grit and soul. Coaches whispered, a Harris kid's gold. But he never tied his name to Michael's, never cashed that old spark. It was his offering, given free, a ripple he'd set loose without a net. When Michael Jordan left Wilmington in the summer of 1981, the dust of his bike tires settled on a town that barely grasped what it was losing. He was 18, a kid with a UNC scholarship and a fire Coach Daniel Harris had stoked in a dim gym 2 years prior. Daniel watched him go. A good luck card pressed into Michael's palm, his number scrawled with a hope he'd never voice. Call if you need me. But he knew Michael's path was a river breaking free, rushing beyond the banks of a small coastal town. What began with a $50 loan and a pair of pro stars would soon thunder across the world, and Daniel, rooted in Wilmington, turned his eyes to the horizon, content to trace a legend he'd helped birth from the quiet of his own life. At UNC, Michael didn't just play, he burned. Freshman year, 1981, he was a lean streak of lightning, fast, fearless, every move a dare. Daniel followed through, faded newsprint, black and white photos capturing a boy whose jump now cleared the past. Then came March 29, 1982, the NCAA championship against Georgetown, a night etched in Daniel's bones. He sat with Laura on their worn couch, Hannah fussing in her bassinet, the TV's glow painting their faces. With 15 seconds left, Michael took the pass. 17 feet out, calm as a preacher, and sank the jumper. The net flared, the crowd's roar crackled through the speakers, and Daniel shot up, shouting, "That's him!" Laura laughed, tugging him down, but his eyes stayed glued to the screen, wet with something he couldn't name. That shot wasn't just a win. It was a vow fulfilled. A skinny sophomore proving the world wrong, one swish at a time. College piled glory on him. All-American 1984, Player of the Year. But the NBA was his true call. June 19, 1984, the draft beamed live, a spectacle Daniel wouldn't miss. He perched Caleb, barely 2, on his knee, the boy's tiny hands gripping a toy hoop. "Chicago Bulls select Michael Jordan, University of North Carolina," the commissioner declared, and Daniel's heart thudded, a drumbeat of pride. Third pick, a Bull. The kid who'd pedaled through dawn frost now stood on the edge of forever. Rookie year, he averaged 28 points, a whirlwind of grace and grit, shattering defenses with a smile. Daniel hoarded clippings, reading by lamplight when the house slept, tracing the arc of a promise made over a folded $50 bill. The 90s crowned him king. Chicago bent to his will. 6 championships, each a pillar of his reign. June 11, 1991, the first against the Lakers, Daniel watched past midnight, Laura dozing beside him. Michael's 30 points, the trophy's gleam. Daniel's throat tightened, seeing not the star but the boy who'd polished those pro stars nightly. The Dream Team in 92 painted Barcelona gold, Michael's name a prayer on foreign tongues. Daniel sat with Caleb, now 6, cheering, "MJ's unstoppable, Dad." Retirement struck in 93, baseball a strange detour. But he returned in 95, fiercer, hungrier. March 19, 1995, "I'm back," flashed across screens, and Daniel nodded, knowing that spirit never broke. The Flu Game, June 11, 1997, held him spellbound. Michael, sick, still pouring in, 38. Daniel leaned forward, awed. That resolve, that steel. It was the same he'd seen in a kid who'd cried but kept shooting. Wilmington felt his weight. Kids swapped quarters for Air Jordans. $150 by 98, a treasure. Mimicking his flights in dusty lots. Caleb begged for a pair, Daniel paid, seeing Michael's spark and his son's leap. Reporters prowled, hungry for crumbs of his roots, but Daniel gave them dust. He worked harder than anyone. Michael's face loomed. Billboards, cereal boxes, a myth in motion. The Last Dance, June 14, 1998, sealed it. Sixth title, a fadeaway over Utah that hung in the air like poetry. Daniel watched alone. Laura out, scrapbook splayed. Tears fell, not for the icon, but for the boy who'd stood in his gym, sweat-soaked, vowing to soar. Michael became more than a man. He was a tempest, a titan. Streets bore his name, statues rose, but Daniel saw the soul, the swishes, the promise, the $50 spark. From a cut sophomore to a legend carved in eternity, Michael's ascent was a hymn to will, sung loudest by the quiet faith of a coach who'd believed when the world hadn't. When Michael Jordan rolled out of Wilmington in the summer of 1981, the hum of his bicycle tires against the sun-cracked pavement was a quiet farewell to a town that didn't yet know it was losing a king. He was 18, a wiry kid with a UNC scholarship tucked in his back pocket, and a fire Coach Daniel Harris had glimpsed 2 years earlier in a darkened gym, a flame sparked by a $50 loan and a pair of Pro Stars. Daniel stood at the edge of that departure, pressing a good luck card into Michael's calloused hand, his phone number scribbled in hasty ink with a silent wish, "Call if you ever need me." But he knew, even then, that Michael's path was a hawk breaking free, wings spread wide over a horizon too vast for Wilmington's pines to hold. What began with a boy's promise to pay back a debt would soon blaze across continents, and Daniel, tethered to his coastal roots, turned his gaze skyward, content to watch a legend unfold from the sidelines of a life he'd chosen to keep small and steady. At UNC, Michael didn't just step onto the court, he claimed it. Fall of 1981, freshman year, he was a lean shadow darting through drills, his quickness a blade, his hunger a growl beneath every move. Daniel tracked him through the smudge of newsprint, black and white snapshots freezing a boy whose jump now defied the gravity of his past. Practices turned to games, games to moments. Then came March 29, 1982, the NCAA championship against Georgetown, a night that carved itself into Daniel's marrow. He hunched with Laura on their thrift store couch, the TV's flicker painting their faces, Hannah whimpering in her crib. With 15 seconds on the clock, Michael took the pass, 17 feet out, cool as a winter stream, and launched. The ball sailed, the net flared, and the Superdome's roar burst through the static. Daniel leaped up, hollering, "That's my kid!" loud enough to rattle the windows. Laura swatted him, laughing, "You'll wake her." But his grin stretched wide, eyes locked on the screen, wet with a pride he couldn't tame. That shot wasn't just a title, it was a clarion call. A sophomore once cut from varsity shouting to the heavens, "I belong." College heaped honors on him like coal on a fire. All-American in '83, Player of the Year in '84, but the NBA was his true crucible. June 19, 1984, the draft crackled live on ESPN. Daniel sat Caleb, just shy of 3, on his knee, the boy's pudgy fingers clutching a toy ball as the commissioner's voice boomed. "Chicago Bulls select Michael Jordan, University of North Carolina." Daniel's chest tightened, a drumbeat of awe and memory. Third overall, a Bull. The kid who'd pedaled through frost for dawn drills now stood poised to conquer a league. Rookie year, he erupted. 28.2 points a game. A blur of speed and finesse, breaking defenders with a flick of his wrist and a smirk that dared them to try again. Daniel collected clippings, reading late by the glow of a single bulb, tracing the thread of a promise made over a folded $50 bill, now weaving into a tapestry of greatness. The 90s forged him into myth. Chicago became his throne. 6 championships, each a testament to a will that bent the world to its shape. June 11, 1991, the first title against the Lakers, Daniel stayed up past midnight. Laura's soft snores beside him a counterpoint to the TV's hum. Michael dropped 30, hoisted the trophy, and Daniel's throat closed, seeing not the champion, but the boy who'd polished those Pro Stars with a rag and a vow. The Dream Team in '92 turned Barcelona into a golden stage. Michael's name a chant echoing from Catalonia to Carolina. Daniel watched with Caleb, now 6, leaping on the couch, yelling, "MJ's the king, Dad!" Retirement blindsided in '93, baseball a detour that puzzled, but he stormed back in '95, fiercer, unbowed. March 19, 1995. I'm back, hit the wires. And Daniel nodded at the paper, a quiet smile tugging his lip. He'd known that spirit couldn't stay grounded. The flu game, June 11, 1997, gripped him. Michael, fever-racked, still pouring in, 38 against Utah. Daniel sat forward, hands clasped, awed by a resolve he'd first seen in a kid who'd cried but kept shooting, now hardened into legend. Wilmington trembled under his shadow. Kids traded milk money for Air Jordans. $150 by 98, a small fortune, mimicking his flights on cracked asphalt courts. Caleb begged for a pair, eyes wide. Daniel paid without a second thought, seeing Michael's spark in his son's bounce. Reporters circled like hawks, sniffing for roots, but Daniel tossed them scraps. He worked harder than anyone I've seen. Michael's face stared from billboards, cereal boxes, TV screens. A deity in high tops. The Last Dance, June 14, 1998, crowned its sixth title, a fadeaway over Utah that hung like a comet's tail. Daniel watched alone, Laura at a friend's, scrapbook splayed on his lap. Tears slipped free, not for the icon's triumph, but for the boy who'd stood in his gym, sweat dripping, promising to make it big, a promise kept beyond imagining. Michael transcended the game. He became a force, a myth made flesh. Streets in Wilmington bore his name, statues rose in Chicago, his silhouette a logo stamped on a generation. But Daniel saw the marrow, the swishes in the dark, the $50 folded in a trembling hand. The kid who'd turned a loan into a legacy. From a sophomore cut to a titan whose shadow stretched across time, Michael's rise was a symphony of will, its notes struck loudest by the quiet faith of a coach who'd handed him the first string. Rain tapped against the window of Daniel Harris's Wilmington home, a steady rhythm that mirrored the ache in his spine as March 2025 bled into its final days. At 69, he sat in his recliner, the same one Laura had picked out at a yard sale decades ago, its fabric worn thin by time and memory. The house creaked around him, a chorus of ghosts. Laura's laughter in the kitchen, Caleb's sneakers pounding the stairs, Hannah's voice singing off-key to the radio. Now it was just him and the rain, the bills, and a past that flickered like a film reel he couldn't pause. On the coffee table lay that photo. Him and Michael, 1980, the pro stars gleaming white, and beside it a letter Hannah had left half-written. Dear Mr. Jordan, my father, Coach Daniel Harris, once gave you... She'd stopped there, her pen hovering, waiting for his nod. He hadn't given it. The TV murmured low, a sports channel replaying the '98 finals. Michael's fadeaway, the shot that sealed his sixth ring. Daniel watched, eyes tracing the arc he'd seen born in a gym 46 years ago. That boy, skinny and stubborn, had become a colossus, his name a thunderclap across generations. Daniel's lips curved, a faint smile breaking through the pain. He'd never cashed in on that, never called, never begged, never waved that $50 like a flag. It wasn't pride, not really. It was faith, the kind that doesn't need a receipt. He'd given Michael a pair of shoes, a chance, and the kid had run with it, leaving footprints too big for any court to hold. Now, those footprints circled back, not in flesh but in memory, as Daniel faced a reckoning he couldn't outrun. Hannah padded in, her hair pulled back, worry etched in the lines around her eyes. Dad, she said, sitting across from him, the photo between them like a bridge untested. I finished the letter. Just say yes and I'll send it. Her voice was soft, pleading, a daughter's love wrestling with a father's silence. Daniel shifted, wincing as his back protested, and stared at the words she'd written. He's struggling now. Surgery, bills. He'd never ask, but I will. He shook his head, slow but firm. Not how it works, Hannah, he rasped, the rain a drumbeat behind him. I gave him what I could. He gave me more than I ever expected, watching him climb. That's the deal. She leaned forward, hands clasped. But what if he'd want to know? What if he'd want to help? Daniel's gaze drifted to the Air Jordans on the shelf. Caleb's, size 10, scuffed from backyard dreams. Then... He'd have come looking, he said, voice cracking like dry wood. He's Michael Jordan. If he remembered, he'd have found me. Hannah's eyes welled, but she didn't push. She knew her father. Knew the man who'd coached kids with nothing, who'd given without tallying, who'd built a life on belief, not barter. Later, alone, Daniel shuffled to his desk, the pain a claw in his spine. He pulled out the scrapbook, yellowed clippings, Michael's rise from Laney to legend, and flipped to a blank page. His hand trembled as he took a pen, the ink unsteady. March 2025. Still proud, Michael, always will be. He paused, then added, "If you ever read this, know it was enough." He closed it, the words a whisper to no one, and leaned back, the rain louder now, a curtain between him and the keychain, thanks Coach H, MJ, glinted in his pocket, a relic of a promise kept one way, not another. Outside, the storm softened, and a thought flickered. What if Hannah sent that letter anyway? What if Michael, graying now, opened it in some gleaming office, his eyes catching on Coach Daniel Harris? Would he remember the gym, the $50, the kid he'd been? Daniel didn't know. Didn't need to. He'd set a pebble rolling, and it had carved a canyon. As sleep tugged at him, the ache easing for a moment, he saw Michael's jump in that empty gym, heard the swish, felt the $50 leave his hand. Some ripples, he thought, don't need to come back. They just keep going, carrying you with them, even when the scoreboard fades. If you've enjoyed this story and want to see more inspiring content about overcoming obstacles, hard work, and believing in yourself, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss the incredible journeys we'll be sharing. And if this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Let us know how you've experienced moments where someone believed in you and how it changed your life. Your story could inspire someone else today. Thank you for being a part of this journey with us.